And thanks to you at home for being with us on this big night. You know, on any normal day, the leaders of the two most powerful countries on earth having their first formal state dinner at the White House, that would be the lead news story in the world by a mile, right? I mean, on any normal day, frankly, this radical, fascinating Pope addressing the United Nations and speaking at the 9/11 memorial and then holding a mass at Madison Square Garden where they turned the concession stands, the place where you get popcorn and Pepsi, they turned the concession stands into confession booths before his arrival. And any normal day, that would be the lead story in the news by a mile. Even the way he got there. I mean, on any normal day, the Pope's drive to Madison Square Garden through an adoring and ecstatic crowd of 80,000 people in Central Park, that would be the lead story in the news by a mile. Presidential candidate Hillary Clinton probably thought this new campaign ad of hers, her best campaign ad by far, she probably thought this would be the biggest political news story of the day. Donald Trump probably thought when he got booed at by a big crowd of hard-right conservatives at the values voter thing today, Donald Trump probably thought that that would be the biggest political news of the day. That's probably why he told NBC's Katie Tur that actually nobody booed at him, even though plainly and on tape, people absolutely booed at him.
I've been so nice.
On any normal day, Jeb Bush pulling a Mitt Romney and saying that the Republican Party has to try to attract black voters with hope and not with free stuff. That's the phrase he actually used, free stuff. On any normal day, that statement by Jeb Bush, that would be news today, news tonight, news for days yet to come. But this is not a normal day. This is today. And today, the Speaker of the House, the man third in line to the presidency, the second most powerful man, arguably, in Washington after the President of the United States. Today, he decided it was such a wonderful day that it would be time to shock everyone and quit.
Zippity-doo-dah, zippity-ay, my oh my, what a wonderful day. I like to sing that on my way to work in the morning. Just yesterday, we witnessed the awesome sight of Pope Francis addressing the greatest legislative body in the world. And I hope that we will all heed his call to live by the golden rule. But last night I started to think about this, and this morning I woke up and I said my prayers, as I always do, and I decided, you know, today's the day I'm going to do this. As simple as that.
Who was the first person you told, and what did they say?
Wow. Well, I told my wife.
What'd she say?
It's good. I told my chief of staff and I talked late yesterday. I told him I was thinking that today might be the day. And I told him I'd sleep on it. So before I went to sleep last night, I told my wife, I said, you know, I might just make an announcement tomorrow. Well, what do you mean? What kind of announcement? Well, I might just tell them it's time to go. So this morning I woke up and walked up to Starbucks as usual and got my coffee and came back and read and walked up to Pete's Diner and saw everybody at Pete's and got home and thought, yep, I think today's the day. So my senior staff was having a meeting at 8:45 and kind of walked in before I opened the house and told them, this is the day. It's going to happen sometime. Well, why not today?
Why not today? That is a happy man, right? I mean, that is not usually the way these things go. The last three Republican speakers of the House have not had good endings. Newt Gingrich resigned in political disgrace and amid a big ethics scandal. Bob Livingston resigned in disgrace in a sex scandal. Denny Hastert, he left on good terms in Congress, but now he's under criminal indictment on charges that followed serious sexual abuse allegations. I mean, that's how the last three Republican House speakers ended. This guy, in contrast, is leaving not just on his own terms, sort of, but he's so happy about it, it might not even matter. The man is literally singing Zippity-Doo-Dah. He sang Zippity-Doo-Dah twice at his I'm resigning announcement. And he seemed to mean it when he sung the part that it was a wonderful day. I mean, have you ever seen anybody so happy to have just resigned their job? Ever? Actually, brief digression, I have. For 10 years on and off, I worked with an amazing producer named Nazanin Rafsanjani. Nazanin is a great friend, great person. I worked with her in radio at Air America Radio, and then when I got this TV show, she came and worked here on this TV show, and everybody in the staff fell in love with her, and she just like took over immediately. Wonderful person, amazing coworker, and recently she left. And we threw sort of a staff going away party for her. And at that going away party, Nazanin and I posed for a picture, a Polaroid picture, on the occasion of her leaving the staff of this show. And here it is. So that's me. Doesn't really look like me. I'm wearing kind of a funny little cowboy shirt. And this is me saying goodbye to Naz, right? I'm very sad. I barely even look like me, but I'm very sad. I'm sad that Nazanin is leaving her job. And here, there's Nazanin. You know, not at all sad to be leaving her job. Eric Frender took this picture and he said, think I'm leaving my job. And that was my reaction, and that was hers. See, this is a portrait of happiness for somebody who is quitting a job they want to quit. And that is the closest thing from my personal life that I have ever seen in terms of how John Boehner was leaving his job today. He pulled a Nazanin the way he left today. And we're now about to see if that happiness is because it is intrinsically impossible to be a Republican Speaker of the House in this modern Republican Party. And so anybody would be delighted to leave that job. Or maybe there was something about John Boehner being Speaker of the House that specifically made it so miserable. And that's making him so happy to leave. I mean, to be fair, his tenure has been an ostentatiously terrible time for Congress. The first congressional session where John Boehner was in charge, that was the least effective Congress in the history of the U.S. Congress. That first one where he was in charge, they passed less substantive legislation than any session ever before in Congress since Congress has existed. And then the Congress that came after that, the next one where he was also in charge, those two Congresses back-to-back, those are the two least productive back-to-back sessions of Congress ever in the history of Congress. Since John Boehner has been Speaker, we had a 16-day-long government shutdown for no reason. We deliberately hit and exceeded the national debt ceiling for no reason, which resulted in the national credit rating of the United States being downgraded, which was a significant economic hit to our country at a time we were trying to recover from this terrible recession. I mean, quantitatively, most of what Congress did under House Speaker John Boehner was vote dozens and dozens and dozens of times to symbolically fake repeal Obamacare again and again and again. None of those votes actually repealed Obamacare or actually did anything in the real world except take up time that could have been spent doing real stuff. And, of course, they did give people fundraising opportunities back home. I mean, even though Speaker Boehner has had really big Republican majorities to work with since he's been in charge, he has been able to do as close to absolutely nothing as anyone who has ever held the job of Speaker of the United States. And yes, there are some things that he screwed up himself. I mean, when he first took over, there were a couple of members of Congress who he forgot to swear in. And then he let them onto the House floor to start participating in votes and everything, even though they were technically not sworn in and weren't therefore members of Congress. That was day one of John Boehner's speakership. That was a big, awkward screw-up. You might also remember right at the start of his speakership, they were going to read the entire Constitution out loud on the floor of the House, except they were all reading out of a 3-ring binder and some of the pages stuck together, and so they skipped whole sections of the Constitution accidentally. They also set this new rule where they would have to identify, they'd have to write down what part of the Constitution gave them the authority to pass every single piece of legislation they wanted to work on in the House. They passed that rule. They said it has to apply to every piece of legislation. And then the first 3 bills that they passed under John Boehner as Speaker, they did not follow that rule that they had just put in place. So there was some stuff that, honestly, it was on him. There were some things on which he did not do a great job. And that kind of stuff, particularly very early on, gave rise to, you might remember this, the John Boehner is bad at his job hypothesis, which we have talked about on the air several times. Well, we talked about it a lot. In the big picture, though, to be totally fair, John Boehner may have been bad at the job of being Speaker of the House, but it is unclear whether anybody could have been good at it, whether anybody could have done better because of what Republican politics is now. I mean, yeah, he had big Republican majorities, but they were fractious as all get out, aggressively combative. Republicans right now enjoy fighting with their own leadership, maybe even more than they enjoy fighting with Democrats. And because John Boehner could never corral all of his members into doing any one thing, he very frequently had to resort to asking the Democrats if they could please lend him some votes to help him pass even the really basic stuff. I mean, that was how he passed Hurricane Sandy relief. That's how he finally got the debt ceiling vote in 2014. That's how he got us off the fiscal cliff. That's how they reauthorized the Violence Against Women Act. I mean, time and time again, John Boehner couldn't get it done with Republicans because Republicans refused to go along with him. And he instead had to go to Nancy Pelosi, hat in hand, and beg for some Democratic votes to help him out. And of course, that sort of thing is seen as an unpardonable sin by the most combative and loudest and most telegenic members of his own caucus. And the problem going forward is that there's no reason to believe that dynamic is going to change now that John Boehner is leaving. I mean, that still is going to be the tiny little spot between the rock and the hard place where the next Republican Speaker of the House is going to have to slide himself in after John Boehner leaves next month. But John Boehner really did shock everybody today when he announced his resignation. It's actually, as far as I can tell, it is an unprecedented thing for a House Speaker to leave out of the blue in the middle of a congressional session like this. I mean, absent some big scandal, absent some proceedings against the Speaker or something, I don't think it's ever happened before where a Speaker in the middle of a congressional session just said, I quit, I'm leaving. House Speaker John Boehner today denied overtly that he was inspired to quit because of the Pope's historic visit yesterday, which was organized by John Boehner. It was put into motion by John Boehner in the first place. He was so obviously moved by it. He said today that wasn't it. That isn't why I quit today. But today when he talked with such trademark John Boehner emotion about how moving it was for him to meet the Pope yesterday and how much that experience meant to him, it was kind of hard to believe him that that was not the catalyst for this earth-shaking decision that he made today that shocked the country.
Speaker Boehner, you were noticeably overcome with emotion yesterday.
Really?
With Pope Francis.
Oh, what a surprise.
I'm curious as if you reached this decision last night, if the grace of Pope Francis led you to this decision.
No. Yesterday was a wonderful day. It really was. And was I emotional yesterday? Yeah, I think I was. I was really emotional in a moment that really no one saw. As the Pope and I were getting ready to exit the building, we found ourselves alone. And the Pope grabbed my left arm and said some very kind words to me about my commitment to kids and education. And the Pope puts his arm around me and kind of pulls me to him and says, please pray for me. Well, who am I to pray for the Pope? But I did.
If it wasn't the Pope, then what was it?
Listen, it was never about the votes, all right? There was never any doubt about whether I could survive the vote. But I don't want my members to have to go through this. I certainly don't want the institution to go through it. And so, especially when, I knew I was thinking about walking out the door anyway. So it's the right time to do it. And frankly, I am entirely comfortable doing that.
He is entirely comfortable doing it, meaning leaving. The question is whether whoever comes next ought to be comfortable taking over that job, or whether that is an inherently undoable job that even John Boehner couldn't do, but maybe nobody can. Joining us now is Robert Costa, national political reporter for The Washington Post. Robert just this morning published an incredible piece about an encounter he and another reporter had with Speaker Boehner last night. After the Speaker's Day, hosting Pope Francis at the Capitol. Robert Costa, thanks very much for being here. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you, Rachel.
So can you tell us what happened last night, this sort of odd encounter you had with the Speaker?
It was a surreal moment. My friend Jake Sherman of Politico and I were standing there at twilight, sun setting over Capitol Hill, and we had heard rumors that Boehner may be retiring, and it didn't seem believable, but they were coming from reliable sources. So we thought to ourselves, might as well hang around for a few hours. And so the Capitol was empty, and Boehner finally comes out, and he usually passes by reporters, doesn't take questions, rolls his eyes. And then he did something unprecedented. 5-6 years of covering Boehner, he's never done this. Comes over to us in the hallway, puts his hands on our shoulders and says, come over to this little spot where the Pope met him earlier in the day as the Pope was leaving. And for the next 10 minutes, Boehner starts acting out this entire scene, has me standing where the Pope was standing, and he just kept saying, the Pope said, please pray for me. And he kept repeating it, and we didn't really know how to handle it, so we just let Boehner do his thing. And we just thought to ourselves, what is this after he left? And we thought Boehner seemed at peace with himself and happy.
Robert, when you say that you had heard, and part of the reason you were hanging around late was because you'd heard that he might be resigning, and it seemed far-fetched, but you'd heard that that might be possible. Had you heard those rumors before the visit of Pope Francis? I'm asking because I think everybody's trying to discern, just at a human level, whether or not that obviously very spiritually moving experience for him was the catalyst for him leaving today.
I heard before Pope Francis came. I heard from a couple friends of Speaker Boehner on deep background that Boehner actually had floated the idea, maybe I'll just leave after the Pope because it's the cap of my career. He's a devout Roman Catholic. He's talked to friends in an informal way of saying, wouldn't that be a great way to leave? Brought the Pope, say goodbye to all these churning currents within my party, within the House GOP. No one really believed him, but they told us about it. And it sounded believable to the extent as a reporter, you got to check it out. But Boehner kept close counsel, only told his chief of staff until this morning.
Robert, those cross currents that you were just talking about, obviously nobody knows exactly why he went and how much of it was personal, how much of it was impersonally political, meaning anybody in that job would have been facing those same currents and maybe they became impossible to continue facing. From your judgment, and I know you have great sources among Republicans in Congress, do you feel like some of the hostility from the sort of hard right members of that Republican caucus, that hostility was specific to John Boehner, or is that going to be the inheritance of whoever comes after him, and it's going to be a similarly difficult job?
I think it's more of the latter. Boehner has wide respect throughout the conference. He has a good rapport even with his critics. He doesn't have many enemies on a personal level. I think if, let's say, Majority Leader McCarthy inherits the Speaker's position, he wins the Speaker gavel, he's going to be dealing with the same group of 30 or 40 hardliners who are unhappy with any kind of impasse, any kind of deal legislatively that doesn't really involve an extended fight with President Obama. I think one of the reasons Boehner decided today to do this, he saw a government shutdown on the horizon over Planned Parenthood. He knew if he didn't endure a shutdown, the right flank would have this motion to vacate the chair, and that would put the whole House GOP up to a vote on Boehner's speakership. And he knew that would be a difficult time for him politically, for the whole conference, and so he said no thanks.
He said today, I know I could survive that vote, but that doesn't mean that he wanted to go through it or put the country and his party and his caucus through what it would mean to go through it.
I was just at the Capitol 10 minutes ago, right before I got here, and McCarthy's still there eating fried chicken with his aides. I mean, he's seeming like the consensus pick at this point. The real race, these conservatives, they want a voice in the leadership, Rachel, and so they're going to be trying to be majority leader, majority whip. But McCarthy, he has ties to the Tea Party because he recruited a lot of them in 2010. So he looks like, for now, someone who's going to be the next speaker. But will he be able to avoid the Boehner difficulties? Probably not.
Robert Costa, national political reporter for The Washington Post. Robert, thanks very much. I know it's been a long day and a long week. Appreciate having you here.
Thank you.
All right. What he was just saying about Kevin McCarthy looking like he's the consensus pick, but the Tea Partiers feel like they got Boehner's scalp and they want more. Turns out that's got a few new wrinkling developments in it to get to later in the show. There's so much going on in the news today and tonight. Please stay with us. Lots ahead.
Congratulations, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
Does it feel like a weight off your shoulders?
A wonderful day.